My name is Natalie Harris. I'm 34 years old, and I was married to Ethan Caldwell for 7 years. But even after all that time, I never truly felt like I belonged in his world, or more precisely, in his family's world. The Caldwells were the kind of family you see on polished holiday cards, smiling, coordinated, and untouchable. Ethan's parents, Richard and Patricia, were the backbone of a successful marketing empire. His sister Amanda was a rising star at the firm, and their youngest, Michael, was the charming wildcard who still managed to land plush roles thanks to family connections. I came from the opposite end of the spectrum, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts as a nurse and waitress. Our Christmases were potlucks, and my college tuition came from scholarships and student loans. I never resented that. If anything, it made me proud. But pride doesn't translate well at garden parties where everyone measures success in vacations and vintage wines. Still, I tried. I tried for years. I bit my tongue during backhanded compliments. I baked for their fundraisers, dressed the way Patricia liked, and smiled through conversations where Amanda corrected my pronunciation of things like Sauvignon Blanc. I wasn't just trying to be polite, I was trying to be accepted. And then came the Caldwell Summer Barbecue. Every year, they hosted this grand backyard affair. The kind with white tents, a hired string quartet, catered hors d'oeuvres, and enough social climbing to give you altitude sickness. That year, I had made my grandmother's strawberry shortcake, something Patricia once said she enjoyed. I spent hours perfecting it, hoping that maybe this time, someone might notice me for something beyond just being Ethan's wife. When we arrived, Ethan barely glanced at me as he rushed to greet his father. I stood there with the dessert in my hands, my sundress carefully chosen to match the family's preferred casual elegance, and watched as Amanda floated over, greeted Ethan with a kiss on the cheek, and turned to me with a thin smile. "That dress is cheerful," she said. "The kitchen's pretty full, but I'm sure you can find a spot for your contribution." Later at the table, as I tried to share a recent design project I'd completed, Amanda interrupted me mid-sentence and said, with a theatrical sigh, "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." The table erupted in laughter, including Ethan. I didn't cry. I didn't storm off. I didn't break. I raised my hot dog like a toast, locked eyes with her, and said calmly, "Challenge accepted." And that night, I left. Ethan and I met during our final year at college. I was studying graphic design while working late-night shifts at a coffee shop to cover my bills. He was finishing his business degree, fully funded by his parents, with the kind of ease that felt both enviable and foreign. We bonded over books and bad coffee. He had charm, intelligence, and a quiet confidence that made me feel seen, at least in the beginning. By graduation, we were engaged. The ring he gave me cost more than my entire student loan debt. I remember thinking I'd finally found not just love, but security, stability, a future. When I married Ethan, I didn't just marry him, I married into the Caldwells. And I thought, foolishly, that I was being welcomed into something bigger than myself. But from the very beginning, I could feel the weight of my outsider status. Patricia, his mother, ran the family like a private country club. She was always gracious, never warm. She once described my design work as such a lovely little passion. Richard, his father, frequently explained business base to me over dinner, even though I'd been running my own freelance business for years. Amanda, the sister, was the worst of them. She smiled sweetly while correcting me, always positioning herself just a little above me, a little more Caldwell than I could ever be. And Ethan? He didn't see it. Or maybe he chose not to. "They mean well," he'd say. "Amanda's just helping you adjust. It's her way of showing affection." At first, I believed him. I tried harder. I changed the way I dressed, learned their wine preferences, started using their vocabulary. I sent thoughtful gifts, remembered birthdays, hosted dinners where I cooked meals from scratch, and acted like it didn't hurt when Amanda questioned if our neighborhood was Caldwell appropriate. In the early years, I kept my freelance design business going. I loved it. It gave me purpose, creativity, independence. But when Ethan got a promotion that required constant travel, it was assumed without discussion that I would scale back to manage the household. So I did. My client list dwindled. My world shrank. I became the wife who kept things running so her husband could shine. My identity narrowed, reduced to being Ethan's supportive partner. And in the Caldwell family, that wasn't enough to earn respect, it was the bare minimum to be tolerated. Over time, I started to fade, not dramatically, quietly. My voice softened, my laughter felt rehearsed, and somewhere deep down, the vibrant woman I used to be started to disappear. And until that barbecue reminded me just how invisible I had become. After Amanda's cruel comment at the barbecue and the laughter that followed, something in me clicked into place. Not brokenness, clarity. I had spent 7 years trying to belong to a family that had never once tried to make space for me. And for the first time I saw it for what it truly was, not a misunderstanding, not a cultural difference, but a pattern, a system, one where I was never meant to thrive. So I left. I didn't shout or slam doors. I didn't even wait for Ethan to notice. I simply began the quiet process of reclaiming myself. That night, while he slept, I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, revisiting the early years of our relationship. I remembered the girl who once walked into rooms full of clients with confidence, who laughed freely, who loved her work. That woman had been buried under years of compromise. I got out of bed around 2 a.m., walked to my home office, and opened my laptop. I began researching short-term rentals in Seattle, where my younger sister Clara lived. I looked up bank policies, routes checklists. By dawn, I had a skeleton plan. Ethan left for golf with his father that morning, kissing me distractedly on his way out, already talking about his upcoming Tokyo business trip. The second his car was out of the driveway, I moved quickly. I called Jessica, my best friend and former college roommate. She hadn't seen me much in recent years, but she answered on the first ring. "I need a big favor," I said. "Say no more, I'm on my way." She arrived 2 hours later with coffee, boxes, and a fire in her eyes. We packed only what mattered: clothes, documents, a few sentimental things, and my design equipment. Jessica offered to store anything that didn't fit in my car. Financially, I was precise. I transferred exactly half of our joint savings, no more. I paid my portion of that month's bills. I made a list of services to cancel. Before leaving, I wrote Ethan a letter. I told him I needed space, that I'd taken only what was mine, that I wasn't running, I was choosing clarity. I placed my wedding ring on top of the note, along with a printed copy of Amanda's exact words, the date, and location. Then I walked out the door. Calm, quiet, unapologetic. Seattle welcomed me with 3 straight days of gray skies, and felt oddly appropriate. If Fitty was helping me wash away the life I had left behind. Claire had found me a furnished studio apartment in her neighborhood, a compact space with creaky floors, bay windows, and a tiny kitchen that smelled faintly of lemon and old wood. After years in a suburban house with Ethan, the space should have felt like a downgrade. Instead, it felt like a breath of air I hadn't realized I'd been gasping for. "It's nothing fancy," Clara apologized as we carried my boxes inside. "It's perfect," I said, running my fingers along the chip counter. That first week was all logistics. I opened a new bank account at a credit union. I forwarded mail through Jessica to avoid leaving a trail. I bought a prepaid phone with a Seattle area code. I cleaned up my old portfolio, deleting any trace of work associated with the Caldwell name. Ethan's messages came in waves, first confused, then irritated, then pleading. He never mentioned Amanda's words, never acknowledged the moment that shattered it all. Only demands to come home, accusations of selfishness, talk about his Tokyo trip. I answered none of them. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. I applied for small freelance jobs formatting ebooks, designing social media templates, anything to get my name back into circulation. The pay wasn't great, but with every completed project my confidence grew. My creative voice, long buried under compromise, began to resurface. Then one rainy Tuesday I walked into a local coffee shop near my apartment and stopped short. There, across the back wall, was a vibrant mural abstract, bold, full of life. I couldn't look away. The barista noticed and smiled. "Beautiful, right? The owner commissioned it from a local artist. She's looking for someone to redo the menus and promo materials, actually." An hour later, I was sitting across from Eleanor Marshall, the cafe's owner, with silver-streaked hair and sharp, kind eyes. "I don't care about resumes," she said, waving away my credentials. "Show me something you've made just because you had to." I hesitated. Then I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years, personal designs, ones I'd created before the Caldwell's expectations had reshaped my style. Messy, honest, mine. Eleanor scrolled through them silently. Then she looked up. "You've been hiding," she said. "This work is alive. Do the menu for me, but I want something in return." "What's that?" "1 piece every week, just for yourself. Doesn't have to be perfect, just yours." She became more than a client. She became a mentor, a mirror. Through her, I met other small business owners. My calendar started filling up not with draining, soulless tasks, but with projects that made me feel like myself again. And just like that, I stopped being the woman who disappeared and started becoming the woman who returned. Exactly 1 year after Amanda's joke at the barbecue, I received an email from Westwood Creative, a mid-sized agency in Seattle. They were developing a new campaign for Sheffield consumer brands and had noticed my recent work for a local organic food company. The subject line read, "Seeking designer for national campaign." It wasn't until I read the brief that I noticed the detail. Sheffield was a subsidiary of Caldwell Marketing Group, Richard Caldwell's company. And at first I thought it had to be a coincidence, but the timing it was almost too precise. I called Eleanor. "Do you think this is a setup?" I asked. "It might be," she replied bluntly, "but that doesn't mean you shouldn't take it." After 3 days of careful consideration, I accepted the initial meeting. If the Caldwells had anything to do with it, I wanted to look them in the luck, and if they didn't, this opportunity was real. I refused to let fear tie me to the past. At the first client meeting, I was professional. Thomas, the creative director, made no mention of my history with the Caldwells. We talked design, direction, strategy, timelines. It felt like any other job until the gala invitation arrived. Sheffield was unveiling its rebrand at the annual Marketing Innovation Gala. Attendance was highly encouraged for key contributors, which meant I'd have to walk straight into the Caldwell's domain. I brought it up in therapy. "You have 3 options," my therapist said: decline, attend and avoid, or attend and engage on your terms. So I chose the third. I hired a stylist. I used a portion of the Sheffield advance to buy a tailored emerald jumpsuit, sleek, structured, powerful. Not another black cocktail dress to fade into the crowd. The night of the gala, I looked in the mirror and saw someone new, strong, ready. The event was held at a historic downtown theater, all warm lights and polished wood. I had barely taken 2 sips of the signature cocktail when Thomas ushered me into a group of marketing execs. We talked trends and metrics. I held my own. I felt seen. And then I felt it. That shift in the room, like a current. I didn't need to look to know the Caldwells had arrived. But I did look. Richard was holding court by the entrance. Patricia floated beside him. Amanda was nowhere in sight. Then I saw Ethan. He looked thinner, slightly lost. Our eyes met. His jaw tensed. His expression faltered. But I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I simply turned back to the bartender and said, "Thank you," as he handed me my drink. A few minutes later, Richard approached. "Natalie," he said, his voice careful. "Richard," I nodded. "I'm the lead designer on the Sheffield rebrand." He blinked, processing, calculating. I hadn't realized. "I work with Westwood now. Your team is very pleased so far." He nodded again. "Your work has changed." "Not changed," I corrected. "Returned to its real direction." His discomfort showed just briefly, before he muttered something about Patricia and walked away. I watched him go, steady and calm. I had expected confrontation. Instead, I found quiet power. And I wasn't done yet. Later that night, after the presentation, the room began to shift toward the dinner hour. People mingled with glasses of wine, exchanging business cards and praise. That's when Ethan approached me. He moved slowly, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched. There was no confidence in his posture, just a quiet, tentative energy. "You look well," he said. "Thank you," I replied evenly. "I didn't know you were in Seattle." "That was intentional." He nodded, accepting the truth without protest. "Your presentation, it was impressive. You always were talented." "I still am," I corrected softly. He looked down, then back up. "I've thought a lot about that barbecue, about what Amanda said, and how we all laughed, how I laughed." His voice was lower now, sincere. "I didn't understand what that moment meant to you, but over the past year I've started to get it. I've been going to therapy. My dad thought it was a waste of time, but it's helped." That admission surprised me. Ethan had always dismissed therapy as something for other people, for people who couldn't handle their problems on their own. "I'm glad," I said honestly. "I've realized how I failed you," he continued, "not just in that moment, but over time. I never stood up for you, not to Amanda, not to my parents, not even to myself." "No," I said quietly, "you didn't. But I see it now. You weren't asking for much just to be seen, respected, and I let them diminish you." He swallowed hard. "When you said challenge accepted, I thought you were just angry. I didn't realize you were declaring your freedom." His voice held no blame, no expectation, just truth. We talked for nearly an hour. It wasn't emotional, it wasn't explosive, it was honest. He told me how Amanda had turned her criticism toward his new girlfriend, how Patricia had doubled down on controlling family events, how Richard had been disappointed when Ethan declined a promotion that would have meant relocating again. "I'm seeing everything differently now," he said, like someone adjusted the contrast on my whole life. When our coffee cups were empty, he finally asked the question I knew was coming. "Is there any chance for us? Maybe not now, but eventually." I looked at him carefully. I saw a man who had changed, but not enough, and not soon enough. "I think we both had to become different people," I said gently, "and I like who I'm becoming now." He nodded slowly, no argument, no persuasion. "You were always stronger than I realized," he said. "We both were," I answered. "We just needed the space to find out." In the months that followed, my life didn't explode with glamour or fame, but it expanded quietly, steadily, on my own terms. I moved out of the tiny studio and into a small rental house near the water. Nothing extravagant, just a cozy space with sunlight in the mornings and enough room for a desk, a dog bed, and shelves filled with things I loved. My design work grew organically. Word of mouth from Eleanor's Cafe led to new projects, branding for a local handmade soap business, packaging for a women-owned spice company, a website for a nonprofit. Each client chose me not because of my last name or connections, but because of my work. And most importantly, because I was finally doing it in my voice. Clara became my anchor. Jessica stayed my cheerleader. And slowly, new friendships bloomed, people who knew me as Natalie Harris, not Ethan Caldwell's wife. I started dating again slowly, without expectations, not to fill a void, but to enjoy conversation and connection, to explore without losing myself in the process. One surprising friendship came from Charlotte, Michael's wife. She reached out under the guise of asking for design help with a pediatric clinic project, but our coffee meeting turned into laughter, shared stories, and unspoken understanding. Both of us had been the quiet observers in that family, and both of us had decided to stop shrinking. During one of our lunches, Charlotte leaned over and said, "Amanda's pregnant. She's taking parenting classes, actually, trying to break some patterns." The news hit me sideways. "Amanda? Changing?" She told me, Charlotte continued, that she doesn't want her child to ever feel like they have to disappear to be seen. I said nothing at first. Then quietly, that's a good place to start. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no warm sisterly embrace. Just a moment of human honesty. It was enough. Because by then I had stopped looking back. My story had moved forward page by page, design by design, moment by moment. The Caldwells were no longer the center of my world. I was. 1 month after the Sheffield campaign launched, I sat across from Eleanor at our usual table in the cafe where it all began. Rain tapped against the windows, steady and soft, like punctuation marks at the end of a long, beautiful sentence. "Retailers are thrilled," she said, refilling my coffee. "They're already asking if you'll lead the expansion line." I smiled, not with surprise, but with a quiet pride I had finally learned to claim. "That's the plan," I said, "assuming the terms are clear and respectful." "Always," she nodded. "You've earned that." Later that week, I closed on a house. My first real home. It wasn't big or flashy, certainly not up to Caldwell standards, but it had hardwood floors, a garden I could shape with my own hands, and windows that caught the morning light just right. Best of all, it was mine. Fully mine. Bought with money I earned from work that honored who I was, not who I was supposed to be. My therapist once said that healing isn't returning to who you were before the pain, it's becoming someone new who can carry that story with wisdom instead of wounds. And that's exactly what I had become. The woman who once stood in a sundress with a strawberry shortcake, hoping to be seen, was long gone. In her place stood someone who no longer needed to be invited to the table because she'd built her own. And then, one morning, I opened my journal and wrote the words that had been waiting inside me since the day Amanda spoke hers. Sometimes we must disappear from other people's narratives in order to discover our own. The opposite of disappearing isn't being seen. It's being fully present in your own life. Because once you show up for yourself truly, unapologetically, the need for outside approval begins to fade. Amanda thought her words would hurt me, and for a moment they did. But in the end, they gave me something unexpected. A challenge that became an awakening. A retreat that became a reinvention. A disappearance that became visibility in the places that mattered most. If you've ever felt erased by the people closest to you, if you've ever questioned your worth because others failed to recognize it, let me tell you this. You are not invisible. You are not disposable. And you never need to disappear to be seen. But if you do disappear, let it be for yourself. Let it be the beginning of something bold, something real, something fully yours. Thank you for walking through this story with me. And if it resonated with you, I'd love to hear your voice too. Drop a comment below. Share your experience. Let someone else know they're not alone. And if you believe someone out there needs to hear this message, please like, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away and become